I live on a private lake that I legally own with full rights to use the water, build a dock, and keep my boat. Everything was peaceful until Karen, the president of our HOA, decided she suddenly had authority over my lake. One morning I walked outside and saw a tow truck backing up to my dock. Karen stood there with her sunglasses and clipboard, yelling that my boat was too big, ruining the community aesthetic, and was now being confiscated by HOA order. I showed her the legal documents proving the lake wasn't even part of HOA property. She didn't care. She kept yelling that she was the law around here. So I called the sheriff. The sheriff arrived, checked the property records, and told Karen in the calmest voice ever that she had zero authority over my lake and that trying to tow my boat was attempted theft. Karen exploded, saying she'd shut down my access anyway. And that's when I decided to end this once and for all. The next weekend, Karen and her HOA Lake Club showed up with kayaks and paddle boats for their exclusive HOA lake event. But when they tried to launch, they found a brand new metal sign installed. Private lake, no HOA access. Trespassers will be removed. I walked out with the deed in my hand. I told them they were officially banned, every single one of them. They argued, screamed, and even tried to call the police. But the police told them the same thing. The lake is mine. They had no rights. Leave immediately. Karen stopped away, furious, her club following like angry ducks. Since then, no one has touched my boat, and the HOA never tried to claim my lake again.
It stood at the edge of Lake Serenity, marking the boundary of the 15-acre lake that belonged exclusively to my property. My family had owned the land and the lake with it for 3 generations. But tell that to the Serenity Shores Homeowners Association, HOA, particularly its self-appointed watercraft czar, a woman named Brenda. Brenda, with her tightly pulled blonde ponytail and a clipboard that seemed permanently glued to her hand, ruled the HOA with an iron fist and a laminated copy of the bylaws. The problem was, those bylaws governed the Serenity Shores community and its shared amenities, not my private lake. The arrival of the beast. My new boat, the Mariner, was my pride and joy. It was a 28-foot cabin cruiser, certainly not a dinghy, but perfect for weekends spent fishing and relaxing. I kept it moored at my private dock. The day the Mariner was delivered, Brenda appeared at my dock like a hawk sighting prey. "Mr. Thorne," she announced, her voice already pitched for conflict, "I'm afraid that thing cannot remain here." I raised an eyebrow. "Good morning, Brenda. It's my boat, on my dock, on my lake. Why can't it remain here?" "It exceeds the community's maximum length regulation for aesthetic compatibility," she recited, flipping pages on her clipboard. "Article 4, Section B, Subsection 3. No watercraft shall exceed 22 feet in length to preserve the harmonious visual profile of the waterfront. You are in violation." "Brenda," I said, leaning back against the Mariner's railing, "your community is across the road. Your bylaws stop at my property line. This lake, Lake Serenity, is mine. The only rules that apply here are mine, and they say, the bigger, the better." She gasped, clutching her clipboard like a shield. "You are being deliberately obtuse. We are all part of the Serenity Shores environment. I have already contacted the towing service." The tow truck and the trap. Sure enough, an hour later, a heavy-duty tow truck, clearly intended for large trailers, pulled up to the end of my driveway, unable to come any further due to a locked gate and a very strategic line of landscaping rocks. Brenda, wearing a triumphant smirk, directed the bewildered tow truck driver. "He's trying to evade the rules. Just get to the dock and pull it out." "Ma'am," the driver said, looking at the towering gate, "there's no way in, and I can't tow a boat out of a lake. I need a trailer, and I need access." That's when I stepped in, holding a laminated document of my own. It wasn't HOA bylaws, it was the deed to my property. Let me clarify the situation for you, driver. This entire body of water, from the North Shore to the South Shore, and every inch of the land surrounding it, belongs to me. This is not a common access lake. I pointed to Brenda. She has illegally summoned your services onto my private property. I suggest you leave immediately before I charge you both with trespassing. The tow truck driver, seeing the deed and the locked gate, wisely turned around and left. Brenda stood there, utterly defeated and furious. "This is not Overthorn," she hissed, storming away, her ponytail swinging like an angry pendulum. The ultimate retribution. A week later, I noticed a strange sight. 10 kayaks, 4 paddleboards, and 2 small sailboats gliding across my lake. It was the Serenity Shores Lake Lovers Club, Brenda's social group. They were loudly splashing, talking, and generally enjoying the scenery. I grabbed my binoculars and saw Brenda giving a smug, self-satisfied wave in my direction. They were using my lake, clearly believing that if they couldn't control my boat, they'd simply exercise public access over the water. This was the final straw. They had ignored my warnings and trampled over the concept of private property. I walked to my shed and pulled out my industry-grade battery-powered PA system. I tested the microphone. Check, check, 1, 2. I stood on my dock and aimed the speaker directly at the center of the lake. Taking a deep breath, I hit the button and let loose. "Attention! You are currently trespassing on private property. This lake is not a shared amenity. It is mine." The sound echoed off the hills, making everyone on the water freeze instantly. Brenda nearly tipped her pryac. "I am now revoking any unwritten, assumed, or inferred permission to use this waterway. You have exactly 5 minutes to paddle to the shore, haul your equipment over the trespass line, and return to the HOA community." A man in a sailboat started to protest. 4 minutes and 50 seconds. Failure to comply will result in me contacting the sheriff and filing charges of criminal trespassing and damage to private ecological areas. The spell was broken. Pure panic set in. There was a sudden, chaotic rush of paddles and flailing arms as the entire Serenity Shores Lake Lovers Club scrambled towards the closest shore. Not an easy task with the small boats. They were forced to awkwardly drag their expensive watercraft across my wet, muddy grass to get off my land. I watched, arms crossed, as Brenda, drenched and red-faced, hauled her kayak away, shooting daggers with her eyes. She tried to say something, but I simply pointed to the private property sign. I didn't hear another word about the size of the Mariner or any complaints about my rules ever again. My boat remained, beautifully big, floating on my perfectly quiet, private Lake Serenity.
In a quiet lakeside community where everyone prided themselves on showcasing their boats, I never imagined my love for sailing would provoke such a dramatic showdown. I had just purchased a brand new sailboat, one that was perfectly designed for both leisure and racing. It was a beauty, sleek, powerful, and a long-desired dream that finally came to life. One sunny Saturday, after a long week, I decided to take my boat out for its maiden voyage. The excitement was palpable as I moved through the gentle waves, the sun reflecting off the shimmering water, but bliss turned to bewilderment when I returned to the dock and noticed a small crowd gathering. Leading the charge was Karen, the self-appointed HOA president, her arms crossed and face flushed with indignation. "You can't park that here. Your boat is too big for this lake," she declared, pointing an accusatory finger, like she was divinely mandated to dictate what constituted an acceptable boat size. I was taken aback. The lake had always been a haven for boaters of all sizes, and I had checked the community guidelines meticulously. My boat was well within the permitted dimensions, but the rules didn't matter to Karen. She was determined to make an example of me. "Look, Karen," I said, trying to remain calm. "My boat is within the HOA regulations. I'm not doing anything wrong." But she wasn't listening. Instead, she launched into a tirade about how my boat disrupted the harmony of the lake and constituted a threat to the delicate ecosystem. Before I knew it, she was calling for a tow truck to remove my beloved vessel. That was the breaking point. She didn't realize that I had a few tricks up my sleeve. I had always been courteous and friendly with my neighbors, but this was a different kind of challenge. I decided it was time to show her that the community didn't support her overreach. The next day, I organized a lakeside meeting, inviting fellow residents to discuss the escalating tensions initiated by Karen and her club of boating critics. I shared my story, and to my surprise, many had similar experiences with her controlling antics. It turned out that her reign of terror over boating practices did not end with me. Several neighbors had been secretly intimidated into silence. Together, we devised a plan. We decided to propose changes to the HOA rules to ensure that every voice was heard and that no one person could dictate what was acceptable on the lake. We scheduled a vote to challenge Karen's authority. When the day of the meeting arrived, the air was thick with tension. Everyone gathered in the community center, ready to present our collective grievances. I took a deep breath, shared my experience, and was greeted with applause from my neighbors. One by one, others shared their own tales of frustration, and the crowd grew more supportive by the minute. When it was time to vote, the results were overwhelmingly in favor of our proposal. Not only did we revise the boat size regulations, but we also amended the rules to limit one-person authority over community decisions. Karen's power was effectively stripped away. As I left the meeting, I felt a rush of adrenaline. I had not only saved my boat, but also fostered a sense of community among my neighbors. As for Karen, she became a mere footnote in our lake's history, and I made sure to sail my boat proudly, celebrating the freedom we had fought to reclaim.
The first notice came on crisp, expensive stationery. It was from Deborah, the HOA president, and it was not a request. It was a decree. "Dear Mark," it began, though the tone was anything but dear. "It has come to the attention of the Homeowners Association that the vessel parked in your driveway exceeds the acceptable dimensions for our community as outlined in Bylaw 14, Section C. You have 72 hours to remove this eyesore or it will be towed at your expense." I looked out my window at my baby, a beautiful 22-foot center console fishing boat named Serenity Now. She wasn't an eyesore. She was my retirement dream, freshly purchased for lazy days on the lake our community was built around. Deborah, or HOA Karen, as the neighborhood WhatsApp group secretly called her, had always been a nuisance. Lawns half an inch too long, garbage cans put out 6 hours early, the wrong shade of beige on a mailbox. But this was an escalation. I tried reason. I went to the next HOA meeting, a stuffy affair in the community clubhouse. "Deborah, the bylaw is for oversized commercial vehicles," I explained calmly. "It's to prevent someone from parking an 18-wheeler in their driveway. My boat is a recreational vehicle. It's on a trailer. It fits entirely on my own paved driveway." She adjusted her designer glasses, a tight smile on her lips. "The bylaw specifies length and visual bulk. Mark, your boat is visually bulky. It disrupts the community's aesthetic harmony. It's simply too big." The other board members, a sycophantic bunch who were clearly terrified of her, nodded in unison. My appeals fell on deaf ears. The final warning came with a threat. A tow truck was scheduled for Saturday at 8 a.m. That's when I decided to play my ace, or more accurately, my deed. You see, while the HOA governed the houses, they had just always assumed the lake was common property. It wasn't. My grandfather, who built my house, one of the first in the development, had a quirky clause in his original land purchase. He bought not just the plot, but the entire spring-fed lake and a 15-foot perimeter of land around it. He'd sold the land for the houses, but kept the lake, a fact buried deep in the county records and our family documents. We had always let the community use it, a silent, generations-old gentleman's agreement. Until now. Saturday morning arrived. I was sipping my coffee on the driveway when the tow truck rumbled up, followed by Deborah in her pristine white SUV, a look of triumphant vindication on her face. "Morning, Mark," she said, smug as a cat. "I see you've chosen the hard way." "Good morning, Deborah," I said, taking a slow sip. "Lovely day for some property law." Her smile faltered. Just as the tow truck driver was hooking up to my boat trailer, a different truck pulled up. This one belonged to a fencing company. A crew of burly men piled out and started unloading posts and private property signs and rolls of sturdy green mesh fencing. "What on earth do you think you're doing?" she shrieked. "Securing my property," I said, pulling a folded, notarized copy of the land deed from my back pocket. I handed it to her. "As you can see, this lake and the land immediately surrounding it have belonged to my family since 1958. Your HOA has no jurisdiction here. You've been using it by our grace, and as of this moment, that grace has been revoked." Her face went from pink to a blotchy, furious red as she scanned the document. This is impossible! You can't do this!" "Watch me," I said, turning to the head of the fencing crew. "Start at the community clubhouse dock and work your way around. I want every access point blocked." The scene was pure, unadulterated chaos. The Karen cabal, alerted by their queen, descended upon the shoreline, shouting and waving their hands, but they were powerless. The fences went up. The private property, no trespassing signs were hammered in with satisfying thuds. The boat club's opening day, scheduled for that afternoon, was canceled indefinitely. The fallout was swift and glorious. Deborah was ousted as HOA president within a week by a mob of angry former boaters and sunbathers. The new board, a much more reasonable group, paid me a visit with their tails between their legs. We reached a new agreement. The community could regain lake access under my rules. Rule number 1. No HOA bylaw shall ever apply to anything parked on my driveway. Rule number 2. My boat, Serenity Now, gets the prime parking spot at the dock whenever I want it.